When you were basically told after 3 years, like, we don't want you anymore, what did you do and how did you pick up the pieces?
I'm so grateful that I got fired. I may not have ever won a championship if I came in with all the hype.
If there's a definition of a prodigy, your story seems like that's what you were.
I was out there racing against, 50-year-old men when I was 9 years old. I didn't have to work at my craft. I was just good.
You first started losing a bit. You said it took you like 3 years to wrap your head around that.
I thought I was great. Once I realized I'm not that good, it was a challenge I didn't see coming.
What traits, what skills make up an elite driver?
You got to be able to handle the pressure, right? Because, our playoff system is pressure built.
What would your advice be to young athletes? Like, you have a bad game. How much time do you spend thinking about that game?
I'm going to look inward first before anything else. Like, I'm going to look back and say, okay, where did I screw up?
As you get to the top levels, it becomes more of a team sport, even though it looks on the face like an individual sport.
You look at Team Penske, there's 500 employees working there. How do you lead a team like that? I failed miserably.
Before we get to the podcast, if you have middle school or high school kids that play sports and you don't want to fundraise like me, we got you covered. My buddy Chris Carneal owns Booster. Chris?
We help schools and sports teams raise funds in a super fun and engaging way. In fact, the last 22 years, we've raised $750 million, and we can't wait to help you. Choose booster.com.
Welcome back to Pure Athlete. I'm Jeff, along with Britt and Brad. And guys, how are we doing today?
Well, we're all kind of looking
We
coordinated
are color
today.
coordinated. Let's just get that out of the way. Don't let that distract you from
Not trying to
what
set
we're
a
doing.
down mood here. We're all gray and, kind of getting ready, trying to get through spring or trying to get to spring, I guess.
That's true. That's true.
It's a great time of year for
It
sports,
is,
man.
I said it. You got, actually, as we're doing this, the first MLB game was this morning in Tokyo. The Dodgers and Cubs, and Ohtani was back home. You got March Madness, the players, and
Masters coming up.
Yeah. And of course, our guest today, NASCAR's in full swing right now.
Yeah.
And excited to have today's guest, one of the best in NASCAR, and just a great dude, a great role model. Joey Logano, thanks for joining us, man.
What's happening? Thanks for having me.
I see you got a better setup than we got. We got, I think, my jersey somewhere here, but we don't have those. I'll tell you that.
It's pretty impressive.
If you're going to get them, you got to show them a little bit, right?
That's right.
Oh, man. Well, tell us a little bit. I know you're racing every weekend right now, but kind of what you're up to. I know you're in North Carolina now at home, but you get, 4 or 5 days off, I guess, every week between the race, but I know there's a lot of preparation.
Yeah, I wish you can call them days off. They're just nights at home is how I look at it, because it's constant. You constantly are just looking to get better, right? It's just how sports are, right? You can't just show up and game day and expect to be good, right? Without doing the prep work, without working at your craft and trying to be better, right? And the same thing in NASCAR, right? Mondays we're typically going over the previous race a lot and starting to look into the next race. And then, your Tuesdays and Wednesdays, whether it's full of media things, and then Wednesdays, a lot of times your prep day and kind of going over the last details. And then there's, you're constantly, you're at the racetrack, you're going over your car, your what you want to do for restarts and the strategy of the race itself. So it's just a constant go all the time. But you get in that flow, right? You start to get your rhythm going. You start to know how to balance your days out, and it works out good. I enjoy it.
Joey, I am curious. Are you on the track when you're at home a lot during the week when you're racing on both weekends, or you're only on the track when you're at location?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things about our sport is that we can't just jump in a race car. NASCAR puts rules in place to where we cannot take a NASCAR car of any sort to a racetrack of any kind, right? Like not even the tracks we don't race at, and go make laps. A lot of that's because of the cost, right? You think about what it costs for a race car to get there, right? Set of tires is around $3,000. They last like 25 laps, right? So, and the engine bill is like $100 a mile. Think about it. So you start running the cars, it gets really expensive. The teams got together and said, hey, let's stop this. If nobody can test and nobody can practice, no one gets an advantage. So then as a driver, you're sitting there saying, dang it, like, how do I get better now? Like, I'm not making laps. I'm not doing that stuff. So, you start to just become a student of the sport as much as you can, as far as studying things, looking at data, understanding the race car better, being prepared as much as you possibly can without being in the race car itself. Right. And then outside of that, like I drive my 4-wheeler every day because I like that. Right. Some people have go-karts. Some people they drive different things throughout the week to stay, a little bit fresh. But everyone does things differently.
Joey, when you're researching you, I mean, you're probably, if there's a definition of a prodigy, I mean, your story seems like that's what you were. Can you tell us just kind of like your childhood growing up and how you got into racing? I think you grew up in Connecticut and then moved to Georgia. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of your story growing up and how it all blossomed for you?
Absolutely, yeah. So my story, grew up in Connecticut. I got a go-kart from Santa Claus when I was like 5 years old, and I loved it. Absolutely loved driving. Every day I got home from school, get in this yard cart and just make laps in the yard, completely destroy the yard. That's like all I wanted to do. And so a friend of my dad's, his kid was racing these cars called quarter midgets, which are kind of a go-kart with a roll cage on it. We went and watched a little bit, but at the time my dad couldn't commit the time to be able to go to the racetrack every weekend. He was running a garbage business at the time in Connecticut. And so we waited a year, then we got a car and I started racing and we started winning and really had no idea why, right? Like there was no coach. We didn't even know how much air to put in the tires. Like we were as basic as it gets and we'd go out there and win. And we just kept kind of going through the ranks. As you go up, there's different types of cars that you can race as a kid. And my dad did a great job at putting me in uncomfortable situations at a young age. And so I was always like the youngest in every class I was in. To the point, like we had a fake birth certificate that allowed me to go racing a little sooner. Like we went to the extreme.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
I was out there racing against 50-year-old men when I was 9 years old.
Wow.
That's what I would do. So naturally that progressed my career at a really high rate because I was driving cars that were just big and fast and more than any other kid was doing at the time. And that drew a lot of attention to me and gave me a lot of opportunities at a younger age as well. Because I did all that, Mark Martin, who is a Hall of Fame race car driver, was like, this is the next guy, right? They said, Joey Logano, he's the next guy that needs to be in the car. I was 15 years old. Well, at that time, Joe Gibbs Racing saw that, respects Mark Martin. They signed me up and paid for the rest of my career to get to racing in Cup. And I drove for them for 4 years in Cup, and then I've been with Penske ever since. But it was a very rapid and quick rate to get to the Cup level as quickly as possible. With all that being said, I got moved up too quickly, right? Like it was all fine when I was a kid because I just jump in and I would win. And I relied 100% on talent. I didn't have to work at my craft. I was just good. And then I'd gotten the Xfinity level, which is one level down from Cup, right? From the big dogs. I got in that level. I won my third race. We're winning races right off the bat. And then Tony Stewart, who was driving the 20 car at the time, goes to start his own race team. Joe Gibbs Racing's there saying, we need to find a driver for the 20. Here I am with 8 Xfinity races under my belt. And they're like, you're our guy. And I'm 18 years old. And I'm like, of course I am. Like, I'm great. I believed it. I drank the Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? I was like, of course. And then I got in this Cup car and I raced against all of them that are the best, right? Like all the guys and kids that had all the talent growing up that didn't have to work at it were all racing in one league, right? The best. And I sucked. Like I wasn't even close. And that was my first slice of humble pie. That times I wish I had that younger to learn how to lose a little bit better and learn how to become better. And because of that, it took me 3 years to get my head wrapped around how to make myself a better driver, a better person, a better leader. And ultimately I lost my job at Gibbs because I couldn't learn quick enough and I didn't have the right attitude to start. And hindsight 2020 has worked out amazingly well. Being at Team Penske and everything that moved on, the stars aligned, God had his favor on me, but it definitely was a big downturn, but it came back at least.
So Joey, dive into that a little bit more. So take us when you first started losing a bit, and you said it took you 3 years to wrap your head around that. Tell us what did that feel like? How frustrating was that? what did you turn to? How did you get through that over the course of a couple of years?
Yeah, it's tough because when you're the prodigy, right? Like, and you have all the hype behind you, right? Saying you're going to be, everyone says you're the next Jeff Gordon, right? That's what I heard all the time. Joey Logano's the next Jeff Gordon. You're like, yeah. And everything I jumped in, I would win. So I was like, you dang right I am. Watch this, And so as an 18-year-old kid, you believe that stuff. And looking back at it, it was one of the worst things for me. Like the best and the worst. Like it gave me the opportunity to get in a race car. That's one of the hardest things about our sport is getting the opportunity to drive a good car because it's so expensive, right? You can't go to the store and buy a race car, right? You can't just go to your local sporting goods store like you can a baseball bat, you just can't do that. And it's expensive. So I had the opportunity to progress my career because of all the hype, but on the other side of it, personally, it probably wasn't the best for me. I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't do any different, but it was a challenge I didn't see coming. And like I said, once I understood, like, okay, I suck. Like that's what I had to realize, right? Like I thought I was great. Once I realized I'm not that good, I had to at least figure out like where am I off the most, which was everywhere. Like it was every department. And how do I start to slowly make these gains? And it takes a long, long time to do it. And so, yeah, I mean, what did I turn to? I mean, I had a guy named Mike McLaughlin. He was a retired racer. He kind of became my coach, right? To where like we studied film together. He taught me how to look at things, and even when we were at the racetrack, he went with me, and we would, just dissect everything we possibly can to try to find these little gains here and there. And he was a huge help for me, and at least put a process together on how to get better and what are the okay, we got a little better at this week. We still not too good here, right? And you kind of keep going. And now that I've been doing it long enough, I still use a lot of the same system, but you kind of can mold it into what works for today's world as well.
Joey, gosh, I've got a lot of questions in my mind here. How when they looked at you when you were young, other than winning, and they said this guy's got it, and also if you look at young racers today, like what traits, what skills make up an elite driver?
The same things as probably other athletes that you see, right? Like there's some athletes that have an incredible amount of speed, right? But they can't handle the pressure, right? Or they may have 2 or 3 things, but they publicly or they don't have their life together, right? They're out there doing stupid things, right? And I think when you look at a driver, everything has to go together, right? You got to have speed. You got to have the work ethic. You got to be able to be in our sport for sure. You got to be marketable. That's a huge part of our sport, right? I mean, because I talked about how expensive race cars are, right? Like we're the face, right? So you got to be marketable. You got to be, do the right things from that standpoint as well. You got to be able to handle the pressure, right? Because I mean, our playoff system is pressure built, right? Just like every other playoff system is do or die. Same thing for us. So it's you kind of got to have all that, and there's a lot of drivers that are fast that may have 2 or 3 things that they need, but they don't have the last one. And you just got to be able to put it all together and realize that competition is not just what you see on Sunday on the racetrack. It's everything throughout the whole week. You got to win every department.
We talk a lot about young athletes being able to, as you said, I think there's a lot of great athletes, how mentality wise, the mental part of the game, so you said something right when you came on about after a Sunday race, going back to watch film to figure out what you were doing. How much time do you spend though? What would your advice be to young athletes? Like you have a bad game. How much time do you spend thinking about that game, but also being able to flush it and say, I got to move on. I got to race next week. I can't worry about what happened last week.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that everyone deals with separately and differently. I mean, I'm the person that I'm going to look inward first before anything else. Like I'm going to look back and say, okay, where did I screw up before I look at anyone else on the team and said, man, we could have done this better, that better. I'm looking inward first. And is it hurt? Yes. Like, I mean, it sucks, right? I mean, like being being an athlete, you got to be okay somehow with being like, if you're going to be the guy that wants the glory, right, of winning and being on stage and hoisting the trophy, that means you got to be willing to take the hits too, right? When you don't, like the fingers will be pointed to you.
Yep.
And those days are hard, right? I don't care who you are. And I don't care how many championships you've won and what you've done before. Those days are hard to go through, right? After the race immediately or Monday, right? Like you got to relive it. You got to go through it one more time. Like it's just is what it is. You got to go through and dissect everything you did. What did you do right? What did you do wrong? How do you prevent it from happening again? Learn from it. And then it's got to be over. Like to me, Monday night, I'm done. Like I'm done with talking about that race. I want to hit it hard. Like this, let's just be factual. This last Sunday, I made a huge mistake, and it hurt, and it hurt all. And we're talking here on Tuesday. Yesterday was horrible, right? It was no fun at all. But I knew I had to go through it, and I'm over it. Like I'm done, and you got to move forward. I got another race this weekend, so it's part of what. Like if you want to be the best, you got to do the hard stuff, right? That's to me, that's the dirty work. Right? Like as an athlete, you may not be out there, getting your hands dirty all the time, but you still got to do the hard stuff, right? Which is taking ownership and learning from it.
Love that.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Joey. So going back to childhood again, you said your dad bought you a car, 6 years old. Did your dad have a grand plan for you becoming a NASCAR driver, or was it just let's get a go-kart, it'll be fun? And how did that evolve for you? Was it just let's do this level, and boy, that turned into let's do the next level? And when did you think, man, I could really make something out of this?
Well, I mean, to start, there was the dream was that I liked driving cars. Like he saw that I had the yard cart and I'd like driving it. Okay, well, maybe he'll like racing, right? Like as a parent, right? I mean, I got 3 kids of my own now. Like as a parent, you want to try to find their passion, right? Like what does my kid like to do? And my dad didn't race cars. He didn't know, like, I mean, he's a car guy. Like he enjoyed cars, but he never raced anything in his life. Like it wasn't his thing. And he played baseball and basketball through high school. He was a good athlete, but I didn't really get those qualities and I didn't enjoy it that much. Mm-hmm. Like I liked driving. And so he recognized that just like any good parent would. And we just started doing it together. And like I said, we were winning, and my dad, the way he is if you're winning, then you need to move up. And so it just kept happening at a quicker rate than normal. And so we just kept moving up. Like, well, you're winning. You can't just keep doing this. This is too easy. Like, you got to do the hard stuff. Go to the next level. Go to the next level. So it happened like that. But I wouldn't say until I was, 12, 13 years old, do you really think you have a shot at being a NASCAR champion, right? Like, it's so hard to make it. But so it was about really life lessons and having fun and creating those memories. Because I will say to this day, my most favorite times at the racetrack are still when I was a kid with my dad.
I love it.
And I believe it's probably like that for most kids in sports in general. And my goal with my kids is to, one, teach them the life lessons of sports, but also don't rob the fun and the memories of being don't be the overbearing father, the guy that's yelling and screaming. Like it's supposed to be for fun at that age, right? Like when you're 7 to even 10 or 12, like it's about learning things. Like it's about the things that's going to help you later on in life. Because the chances of making it, I hate to say it, chances of making any sport are like slim to none, right? You got to be ridiculously good to make it all the way. Not saying that, you can be a great improved player and still make it somehow, like, yes, but it's about what the lessons are that'll help you in life. Because I think sports teach you more than anything, especially these days, teach you how to lose. Kids, if you don't play sports, you don't know how to lose. And at some point, there's going to be a hard time in your life that may not be around sports, but it's going to be something in your job or something hard is going to happen. And if you've never been put in that situation, you're just not going to be good at it. and it's going to be really hard mentally to be able to handle it. So that's why I think sports are so important for kids.
Joey, do you follow youth racing now? And is it a harder path now than it was when you were growing up to kind of get to the next level?
I don't think it's any harder now than it was. The challenges are the same, right? To make it, there's a lot of different. I mean, I live in North Carolina now, so there's a lot of different types of cars you can race. And my oldest now is 7, and he's starting to take a little bit of interest into racing. And we're going to the track tonight to just go make some laps together. And that's something I'm concerned about. Like, I want to make sure it's fun for him. Like, I don't want him to feel the pressure to have to be great because he's my kid. Right? That's a whole different level of things that I didn't have to go through growing up because I was Tom Logano's son, the guy that has the garbage business, like now Hudson, my oldest, if he wants to race, he's Joey Logano's son, the NASCAR champion. He's supposed to go out here and win. He's supposed to be great. That's not fair. Like, he's no better than any other kid out there. You know what I mean? Like, does he have an advantage because I can help him? Well, yeah. Okay. But it's still a lot of pressure to put on a 7-year-old. He's still 7. Like, I don't want him to think that way. So I got to navigate those waters a little bit.
Coach K once said that more games are lost than won. And I wonder with NASCAR, and for our listeners, is it more sometimes avoiding the big mistake than it is taking a chance on a track? Or when do you kind of have to make that decision like, all right, I got to go now?
You got to define success differently in NASCAR because the facts are it's a 1 in 40 chance if you win.
Yeah.
Right. It's not 50-50 like most sports are, right? Where you're playing one other team, right? I got to compete against 39 other cars out there every weekend. A great season would be winning 5 to 6 races. That means you lost 30 of them, right? Like, you lose a lot. So you have to define success differently. Like, what does a win look like? What are some of the things you did well throughout the race? Is it a certain amount of points you need to score? Is it a top 5 finish, right? Like, how do you define that success? And it's different too, because as a driver, you're part of the decision-making process to make the car good, but it's man and machine, right? It's not man and basketball, right? Where it's the same, right? Or football or baseball, where some things change from week to week, but not as much as 50% of the speed that's on the racetrack is going to be from the car, and the other half is from the driver driving it. And the driver has to cross over, because if the driver can't give the good feedback, the car's not going to be good either. So you got to kind of work, you got to take ownership in both of them. But sometimes you just dealt a car that's just meh, right? And when you have a car that it's like a 15th place car, if you can define success by finishing 10th with a 15th place car, then you can kind of live with that a little bit and say, that wasn't that bad. Like, I got the most out of it as a driver. Maybe I didn't do too good on directing the team on building a better car. So defining success is important.
Joey, I'm curious, as you grew up, and I could be wrong on all this, but as you grew up, it feels like racing is pretty much an individual sport. But as you get to the top levels, it becomes more of a team sport, even though it looks on the face like an individual sport. Talk about that transition, if that's reality of being a team player. I mean, you're the front guy on the team, but it's still a team sport at the top level, is it not?
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail right on the head, right? When you grow up, you're working on your car, you're driving the car. It's just it's like you and your dad doing it, right? And that's really cool. But as you get into the bigger cars, you start to have pit stops. You start to have more engineers. You start to have and now you look at Team Penske, there's 500 employees working there, right? And so you think about how big the team is, right? We're building the car soup to nuts the whole way. And so, you have to become not just a driver, but you have to become a leader, right? So you have to work on that skill set. And there's no real good way of learning how to do that until you're there, because it's not like you're part of a team before that, right? Because to your point, you're kind of on your own until you
Yeah.
join one of these big teams and you go racing. Now it's like, okay, I'm like the leader of this thing, like, or one of them, like the crew chief and the driver kind of together need to be. And well, shoot, how do I do that? Especially when you're, at this point, I'm 18 years old when I first started in Cup, and I'm joined a team that won 2 championships before, and these guys were all like 40 years old, and I'm 18, and I got no stats behind me to say that I have any like power or you should trust me in any way, right? So how do you lead a team like that? I failed miserably. I didn't know what to do. Now it's a lot easier because I have some credibility from some of the things that I've done, and I'm not 18 anymore, and I've been doing it for 16 years. So it's a lot easier to lead a team now. But trying to figure out how to do that was, I didn't even know where to start. I still don't know how to do better than what I did. It was really challenging.
If you don't mind for a second, just, maybe get vulnerable for a second, but a lot of girls and boys that listen to this, at some point they get cut. They get told they're not good enough to be on a team. And we've all heard the stories, right? Like Michael Jordan gets cut from his high school team. What was that like 3 to 6 months after, when you were basically told after 3 years, like, we don't want you anymore in that car? Like, what did you do and how did you pick up the pieces?
Yeah. I mean, it is the hardest time in my life. And I think you have to sometimes keep a lot of things in perspective is probably one of the most important pieces. In my little world, I felt like the world was ending on the only thing I knew how to do. Right? Like my whole life up to that point, which was, 20 years old, when I was 21 years old, when this was happening. I was like, what am I going to do the rest of my life? Like, this is it. Like, I was supposed to be the next Jeff Gordon. That was who I was supposed to be. Now I'm getting fired. And I don't know if I'll ever drive a race car again. And what am I going to do? I mean, you tell me how to handle something like that. That's like, it's depressing, right? It hurts. It hurts a lot. But I just kept going. I kept going, and you gotta use those moments as fuel, right? To fuel the fire. You gotta get angry. You gotta get over the sad part of it, because I think it's fair to feel sad about it. Like, I think that's human, because that's a hard place to be. But I think you got to find the anger too in there, or at least for me, right? Like, I'm better angry. And I think sometimes you got to find that, like, put the chip on your shoulder again, right? You got to go out there and prove yourself every week. And looking back at those moments now, I'm so grateful that I got fired. I'm so grateful I went through that hard time, because it's made me so much stronger. And I may not have ever won a championship if I came in with all the hype the whole time and I never had a hard time. I don't think I ever win one of these trophies behind me. I don't think I ever understand how to handle pressure. I don't think I ever handle, like, how to find, like, that fire inside of you without hard times. I didn't know that at the time, so it was really hard. But now I look back and I'm so grateful for those moments. And it was hard. And the good thing that happened there is I got angry. We went out there and I actually started becoming successful at the very end, even though I was already fired. And I started seeing some success. And that was enough to have Roger Penske, and Shell and Pennzoil to be able to say, hey, this is our guy and we're going to give you a shot. And then I was like, this is my only chance. I'm so lucky to have a second chance. Most people don't have a second chance. But once you have your second chance, you're like, I ain't going to fail this time. Like, I know what to do now. Exactly.
How many races did you have after you found out that you were fired from Gibbs Racing? And did you look at it as kind of a tryout for other teams? Is that kind of how you kind of race in that desperate state?
I kind of knew it was coming for a while, because the results weren't there. And I can't get mad. Like, I'm not bitter towards Joe Gibbs or Joe Gibbs Racing for the decision they made, because it's a performance-based business, right? If you don't perform, you're out. I don't care who you are. Yeah. I don't care what you've done in the past. Like, if you're not doing it, you're not doing it. They're going to go find somebody else. It's the way it should be. So I'm not mad at them for that, but I seen it coming, right? The rumors were flying around, right? Like, there's rumors that Matt Kenseth was going to come over and take the ride and drive the car. And I'm like, okay, like usually when you start hearing rumors like that, it's true, right? And I knew that for a year probably. That like, he was waiting on his contract to end at Roush where he was driving at the time. He's going to come over here as soon as that was over. I'm in trouble, right? Like I'm in big trouble. And it just all, like I said, all kind of worked out that the 22 that I drive now opened up to where I can, shift right over there. But at the time when that all happened, I had, about a year or so to think about it. And it was probably half a year from when it was public that Matt Kenseth was going to drive the 20. I had a half a year of everyone knowing that I'm out and I'm going to have to find something. And I didn't have any at the time.
And Joey, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Those stories, it seems like almost every accomplished athlete that we talk to has a story like that.
Yeah.
I think of Kirk Cousins and what he's going through now, and talking about, tough
Having
people.
grit.
And, and
100%.
all that kind of stuff, which for most kids, it might be happening in Little League. It might be happening on their high school team. It might be happening anywhere. But you've seen it in pro athletes. You've experienced some of that.
I got shown the door a few times in baseball. They put me out to pasture, but I agree. It's a mindset. And I think, Joey, the cool thing, and thanks for getting vulnerable, is you go through those things, and I think it makes you appreciate where you are now and have perspective. And I know for you, being a father now too, I think those are great traits you'll be able to pass on to your kids and talk about those battles.
True. And it's so hard. And I can't even imagine when it's your kid, right, watching it happen. But I think after going through it, it was so good. And like I said, I wish it happened sooner. So I think as a parent, and like I said, I haven't gone through it yet, so I don't know like if I should be giving you advice on this, but I'm just saying as somebody that went through it as a kid, that when your child's struggling in it, it's not bad. Like when your child gets cut, it's not a bad thing. But I think it's very important to be supportive in those scenarios, right? As a parent, like, your kid better than anybody, right? Or at least you should. And if you can somehow help in whatever way your child needs and not make it worse, because it's already hard, right? If your kid's passionate about it and really cares about that sport and they get the bad news, gosh, like that's hard. That's so hard, especially if you're a child. How do you handle that? But if you can just be supportive and keep them going, and you don't want to let them quit, right? You can't let them be a quitter. But those hard times is going to help them later on. Like I said, back to the beginning of this interview, like sports are so important for kids because it teaches them how to lose. It teaches them how to deal with the hard things, because life is going to be hard no matter what. And if you can teach them some of those hard moments when they're young and it doesn't really affect their life at all, like in the grand scheme of things, when you zoom out, from the global view, making a mistake when you're 10 years old versus making it when you're 20 years old is a big difference. And I tell my kids all that, make mistakes, do the hard things, screw up. It doesn't matter right now. Like, go screw up. It's okay. Right. I mean, like if you can make the mistakes when you're young and learn from them, you're going to be way better down the road. And sports give the opportunity for that.
For those of us who don't race, we always wonder about the fear factor of crashes and all that kind of stuff. Do drivers deal with that? Did you ever have to deal with fear growing up of being in the race car and bad things happening? How do you deal with that? Or maybe you don't. Maybe you just don't think about it.
No, you're human, right? I mean, we're not like, you're human. You think about that stuff, right? And you think about it more as you get older, right? When you're a kid, you're invincible. You don't know what pain is yet, right? Like like a lot of times you say, well, you wait till they crash hard, you're going to look at things a little differently, right? Like, cause it's big. But, for me, I put a lot of time and effort into the safety of the car, right? Not just the chassis and the frame structure around you, but like your seat, your seating position, your helmet, your HANS device, like everything, like being perfect. Like I study that stuff. I make sure that my car is right to the best of my knowledge, right? Like I study it enough to where like I talk to enough of the doctors, I talk enough to the engineers that do this stuff and say, okay, I want my car to be perfect. So I have a long career and I don't live in pain post career. Like that's very important to your life, right? Like, so if you can have all that correct, your mind's not on that in the race car because you can't think about that stuff when you're driving. You can't be thinking about the risks when you're driving the race car, right? Like, are they there? Yes. Am I insurable? No, right? Like that's just the facts, right? When an insurance company says, no, you can't buy life insurance. You're like, oh, okay. Like I'm probably not doing the most safe things in the world. Like, all right.
That's sobering.
Right? Like, all right, that's the perspective of everybody else. But I feel pretty safe in my race car, right? Is there a risk I'm inheriting? Obviously, but I feel pretty good about it. So when I'm in the car, I'm not afraid to make the big move, right? Like I'm going to go that. And just like we dissect the race on Mondays, if we wreck and I get through a big crash, I'm doing the same thing about the crash. How did my safety stuff hold out? How do I feel? And there's probably every wreck I've been in, I've made an adjustment to my car afterwards from a safety perspective because I just want that perfect.
Interesting.
Okay, I got one more question. I know we're going long here, and we appreciate it. I know you probably get an amazing adrenaline rush at the start of every race. I mean, it's something we probably can't even identify with. But is Daytona different? I mean, is it a different type feel, or do you feel the same at every race?
I mean, the big races feel different, right? Like when you're all of that, like just more is on the line, right? The Daytona 500, huge, right? Like that's a huge race. But there are playoff races now; they're huge, right? Like they're all like all 10 weeks are like, whew, like it's 10 weeks of hell. To be honest with you, like it is just a grind through 10 weeks to win the championship. But yeah, I mean, in some races you feel a bit more comfortable and relaxed in, right? Like to me, like Richmond is one of my favorite tracks, and I show up there with way more confidence and way more comfortable. And when the race starts, I'm like, yep, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what's coming my way. It's a lot just simpler. But yeah, I mean, you still get the adrenaline rush. You're still pushing a car to its edge, right? Like you're this close from making a mistake and hitting the wall for 400 miles, right? Or 400 laps at Richmond, or 500 laps at or 500 miles at Daytona, whatever it may be. You still got that feeling.
Great. My last question, we'll let you go. Are you going to watch the Braves and Reds when they play in Bristol this year? There'll be 95,000. Are you trying to imagine a baseball field set up in that thing?
That's awesome. I mean, Bristol is maybe the coolest stadium in the world. I've heard that. I mean, like it's massive. You put the race cars out there, it's crazy. But going to a different sporting event and something I'm so used to being a racetrack it's gonna be wild. So yeah, there's plenty of seats, so bring everybody you got.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you this, man. We know you're busy. You're in the middle of the week. You're headed to Miami, but we can't thank you enough for what you talked about today, but also being vulnerable and talking about how you had to go through some tough times, because that's what we like to talk on here, man, is parents letting their kids go through adversity and build toughness, build grit, and develop a great relationship. So thanks for being a great role model, and thanks for joining us today, Joey. Best of luck.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me out. I had fun. Talk to you later.